By my watch, it looks to be 1 o'clock, so I will call this meeting of the Douglas County Planning Commission to order. It appears that we have 5 members present, so we have a quorum. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Michelle Pablo, Deputy Clerk for the record. Members, I'll call your name if you can just say present afterwards. That should suffice for the roll. Chairwoman Casey.
Present.
Vice Chairman Nenenrip.
Present.
Member Walder.
Present.
Member Klutz.
Present.
Member Nelson.
Present.
Member Meyer.
Member Meyer will not be joining us today. He is in Las Vegas on personal business.
Member Paxton.
Present.
Thank you.
Dave Nelson will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to open it for public comment. Public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Planning Commission. Additional public comment periods may be allowed on individual agenda items at the discretion of the chairperson. It is requested that members of the public comment only on those items when they are considered by the Planning Commission. It is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, over which we have jurisdiction, supervision, or control. The Planning Commission would like to encourage the respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. However, if the content is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being irrelevant, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, or amounts to a personal attack or interfering with the rights of others, the individual will be asked to stop speaking and to sit down. Opening public comment is now open at 1:03 p.m. Seeing no one here in chambers, Colleen, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Thank you, Chairperson Casey. I reached out. Nobody has responded back. I think everybody that's in Zoom is here for item 1.
Then I will close public comment and return to the Planning Commission for approval of the agenda. Any comment from the Commission? Then I will entertain a motion for approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes, 6 ayes. Now we have approval of the minutes. I have turned in some corrections to the clerk. Does anyone else have any comment on the minutes? Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move that the minutes of the January 11th meeting be approved with the chair's corrections.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, 6 ayes. Now we will move to public hearings for possible action. I would like to disclose ahead of time that I went up to Lake Tahoe for a field trip to examine the location of this synagogue at 255 Kingsbury Grade and inspected the premises and the area around. And I went to this location with Commissioner Kirk Walder. Does anyone else have anything to disclose?
Madam Chair, I concur with your assessment. We took a driving tour around the area to familiarize with ourselves with the property. I think it's always useful when you're seeing a property in real life. The pictures that are provided are excellent, and they do give a good depiction. And as Chair Casey and I toured the area, we didn't discuss the merits of the property. We were there specifically just to evaluate in our own eyes what it looked like.
Anyone else have something to disclose? Seeing nothing, I will read this into the record. For possible action, discussion on a request for a special use permit, DP 21-0272, for a synagogue located at 255 Kingsbury Grade in the T-MU/Town Center, tourist mixed use / town center overlay zoning district within the South Shore area plan of the Tahoe region. The owner is James H. Milligan, Mountain Greenery LLC, and the applicant is Rabbi Mordeh Richler, APN 1318-26-101009. Lucille Rao presenting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just having some trouble here, technical. There we go. Okay. For the record, Lucille Rayo, Community Development. The first slide here is a vicinity map. The subject parcel is located along State Route 207, also known as Kingsbury Grade, on the corner of Market Street. The zoning is Tahoe mixed use with a town center overlay. The green arrow points to the parcel. This slide is the second floor, which is where the proposed synagogue will be located. I included this slide to show you the floor plan as well as the worship area, and then to discuss the parking requirements for the synagogue or religious assembly. County code requires 1 per 30 square foot of worship area. So we have 410 square feet of the worship area. That's the area where you see the chairs. This thing isn't working so well, sorry. Maybe I'll use the cursor. So there's 24 chairs in here. That's not necessarily how many people that would be there, but they're showing that's how many chairs they can fit in there. The code requires 1 per 30 square feet. So if you do the math, approximately 14 parking spaces would be required for that assembly area. Code also requires that we need parking for accessory uses for any kind of religious assembly. They did not identify that at the same time as worship there would be other activities. Other religious assemblies would have activities, maybe childcare or religious studies at the same time. They're just identifying that they'll have worship at one time and no other activities occurring at the same time. I just wanted to point that out. It's an important component here. So the applicants are requesting a special use permit to allow a religious assembly. Their intention is to purchase the building and keep the existing uses within the building. It's currently home to the Kingsbury General Improvement District, Tally Jane Interiors, and Blue Sky Events. They'll be on the second floor, as I stated. They intend to operate on Saturdays and holy days. Many of the congregants of the Chabad faith walk to their services. It's part of their faith. And the applicant states that they have between 5 and 25 people in attendance at any one time. It has been conditioned, Condition 3, to work with the existing tenants with regards to parking. That would be it's conditioned on packet page 48. And so they'll work with existing tenants. They'll work out a parking agreement. There also is a parking analysis that was submitted to us as attachment 6 and as packet page 58. So the parking analysis does suggest the need for a parking agreement. And basically, the parking analysis is saying that additional parking would be required if any of the events were at the same time that some of the other tenants are there at the same time. So in other words, 9 to 5, basically. So if anything is conflicting, that's the idea for the joint parking agreement. So we believe that the parking agreement would be sufficient to satisfy the parking requirement. And let's move on. So a religious assembly is allowed in the TMU, the Tahoe Mixed Use Town Center Zoning District. That's packet page 45. The definition for religious assembly is also located there. Tahoe Regional Planning Agency, it was not required to do any review at this time. It is only required for a special use permit through Douglas County. So future plans and any expansion of the building or use, then it's possible that TRPA would be required to review it. And expansion would be if they were going to expand the footprint of the building. Any expansion with regards to the use, if the synagogue were to expand onto the first floor, then they would need to come back to Douglas County for review, as well as the Planning Commission. And that has been conditioned, if you take a look at Condition 4 of the staff report, which is located on packet page 48. And a parking agreement has not been secured at this time. Some photos of the site. So the photo on the left is the entrance via Market Street. It's also where the parking lot is located. And this is the corner of Market Street and Kingsbury Grade. Photo on the right is the frontage and along Kingsbury Grade. Took a photo of the parking garage. There are 12 spaces located in the parking garage. On site, there are 11 parking spaces, and that includes 2 handicapped accessible spaces. Findings have been met. That's in your staff report, and the findings are located beginning on packet page 46. So in conclusion, based on the ability to make the required findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, staff recommends approval of development application DP 210272, a special use permit for Rabbi Morty Rickler, Chabad Lake Tahoe Synagogue, based on the staff report, required findings, presentation, and public comment. Any questions?
Are there questions at this time from the commission?
No. So Lucille, has any of the tenants sent any comments in at all?
For the record, Lucille Rayo, I have not received any comments, emails, phone calls. I do know that some of the tenants are on the Zoom meeting, so I can only assume they will choose to speak if they wanted to.
Okay, and in this report, it talks about there's available parking that may be more than 300 feet away and that a transportation would have to be provided to the site. Does anybody monitor that?
I don't believe anyone monitors that. We are requiring that if they go ahead with purchasing the building, that we are given a joint parking agreement. So I would imagine if there is some off-site further than the 300 feet, they would need to describe how that's going to happen and how the shuttling would occur. And we can condition that too as well.
Okay, and I've never seen a parking agreement. What do they look like? Does it call out that I'm going to be borrowing 10 spaces from your lot during these particular hours, or what does it say?
I'm going to defer to our attorney, but yes, I would imagine that the agreement would have the two parties, signing it, as well as describing the days, the times, the hours, and the location. If Sam has something to add.
And is there any, I don't know, I guess I'll call them stickers that the parishioners would put on their cars to say that I don't live in this apartment building, but I'm parking here to go to service?
It's not something that we discussed or that I even know that we would have required or would require. I think the joint parking agreement would cover whatever the agreement was. So at this point, I'm not aware of anything to that effect.
And the last question is, on this joint parking agreement, since we don't have it, can they get parking anywhere? I mean, could they get parking at the casino core and bus people up, or does it have to be within a certain radius?
if they were going to do a joint parking agreement that's over the 300 feet, then they would have to have the shuttling, and I guess we could work something out like that. Yes, there's probably quite a few options for them. We're hoping that they can find something that's much closer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my only question was going to be on the joint parking agreement. So currently, I didn't see where that was a condition. Did I miss that? Is it a condition?
For the record, Lucille Arroyo, yes, it's in the staff report. Let me find what condition it is. Sorry. Let me get my staff report out.
I found it.
Okay.
Thank you. I missed that. It's on packet page 48. Thank you very much.
Sam Booth?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just for Commissioner Neddenrip's question and to Lucille's points, joint use parking is called out in the code 20.692.070. And there are some details in there that it's pretty specific as to what has to be included in the joint use parking agreement. So Lucille mentioned she has a condition that if the special use permit is approved, they must provide a joint use parking agreement. The initial section of that code says that the director may authorize joint use parking facilities, and the director would review and approve that. So staff would review that and approve it. It would be submitted as a condition if the Planning Commission agrees with staff that that should be a condition. There's some language about the common parking facilities that must be provided. It allows it only up to 50% of the required parking facilities may be considered for off-site use. So as we said earlier, I think there's 14 parking spaces required for this use. So they could only provide 7 parking spaces off-site, no more than 7 at least. And what the analysis, what it talks about with the analysis there that we would look at is that we would analyze a use that's primarily a daytime use may alternate parking facilities with a use that's primarily a nighttime use. And so in this instance, you know, I think we believe that a religious facility and their statement and their justification letter that was submitted, they're primarily going to be operating at nights and weekends. And as we know, the existing businesses in the building are primarily operating during the regular business hours during the day. So it seems logical that they would not conflict. The parking analysis that was provided, as Lucille said, did identify that this joint use agreement may be needed. And additionally, it said that there could be a conflict in a net positive parking demand would occur if special events are held by the church during the day on special holidays that would happen during business hours where the businesses are in operation and maybe it's a special holiday. And so then parishioners are also coming at the same time. So we would hope that that agreement would identify in those instances what's to occur, who's to park where. To Mr. Neddenrip's question as well about the site distance, and I think Lucille's report calls that out, but the code conditions for the joint use, it actually does say it must be within 300 feet of the property. I think there have been some instances before where we've approved or the Planning Commission has approved with a special use permit off-site parking and shuttling, but with this specific condition in the joint use parking, it must be within 300 feet. And we believe that there could be properties adjacent or within that 300-foot radius that could provide parking. But again, that's a condition that we're asking to be applied, and the applicant would have to provide that to staff and to the director to review afterwards.
If I may, Madam Chair, I would add one more thing to what Sam said. This is Sam Taylor, for the record, from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. I would note that the agreement should be signed by the Director of Community Development. I would include that specific language in the condition, that it must be signed by the Director of Community Development. In other words, having the director sign it is proof that the director approves of the terms and conditions of the parking agreement.
Anything else from commissioners? If not, I'd like to hear from the applicant.
Chairwoman Maureen?
Yes.
Yes, I had a question I saw on page 16, under building 2, that the fire department would review and obtain approval of this application. And I was just concerned that maybe they would check the loads as far as if the large amounts of people that they may have. Would that be part of their responsibility?
Lucille, do you have an answer?
For the record, Lucio Rayo, so he's asking if there would be a life safety inspection by the fire department? Is that what he was asking?
Ken Paxton, is that what you're asking?
Well, I assume they'll be doing that also, but I was worried about the congregation and the loads on the second floor.
I think he's asking about the weight.
For the record, Lucio Rayo, this is an existing building that's been built to code. We have a building final for it. I'm not quite sure. I don't believe it would be anything different than, I mean, I would imagine it would have been built to withstand additional bodies up there. We have not conditioned it for anyone to go and inspect that. But I mean, we can certainly add a condition.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Sam?
Sam Booth for the record. As Lucille's stating, it's an existing building. To Mr. Paxton's question, at this time at least, there's not any proposed building permits or tenant improvements to the building. So the existing occupancy of the building would apply. And that should be posted on site today, that there's a maximum occupancy. We could do the research and contact the fire department for what that is specifically, but that wouldn't change with this application, and they couldn't exceed that existing occupancy of the building.
Thank you very much. That answers my question.
Thank you, Ken. Does the applicant want to say anything?
This is Lou Feldman. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Good
sir.
afternoon. Yes.
Can you
My name is
introduce
Lou
yourself,
Feldman. I am
please?
the attorney for the applicant, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I wanted to certainly thank staff for their assistance in processing this application, and wanted to give you a little bit of background. The office building at 255 Kingsbury had been for sale for a number of years, and in mid-October of 2021, the Chabad congregation, which is a very small Orthodox Jewish congregation, made an offer to purchase the building contingent upon the issuance of the special use permit, because in accordance with the South Shore Area Plan, religious assembly is a special use. Why that is, I'm not quite sure, but that's the playing field, and that condition is part of the purchase and sale agreement. Since this is located on the corner of Kingsbury and Market Street, it is an ideal location for a synagogue within walking distance from the Lower Kingsbury neighborhood, as well as the casino core. And on October 17th of 2021, James H. Milligan, the owner of the building, agreed to these conditions, subject to the issuance of the special use permit, because the parties, quite frankly, didn't see any issues that would prevent the county from issuing a special use permit. Accordingly, the congregation commissioned the necessary consultants and studies. And it's probably noteworthy that in less than a quarter mile away, the Tahoe Community Church sits on a similar corner at Kingsbury and Daggett. It's a much larger congregation, which, by the way, has been supported by neighborhood street parking since I first moved to the Lower Kingsbury area in the 1970s. When staff interacted with the Kingsbury General Improvement District, I understand that some concerns were expressed concerning parking. And, quite frankly, I was surprised by that, because, as I believe you are all aware, next door is the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And over the last many decades, I have had the experience of attending several contentious public hearings where hundreds of people have attended, myself included. And while I didn't always get a chair, I was always able to find a parking space on Market Street, which is amongst the widest streets outside of Kingsbury Grade and US Highway 50 within the Tahoe Township. So I was struggling. Why is KGID raising this parking issue, which is so contrary to my experience? And I've been here a long time. Well, a review of KGID's meeting minutes disclosed that after escrow was entered into with the synagogue, KGID submitted a backup offer and is trying to purchase the building, which is in escrow. It's therefore, I think, evident that KGID's interest is advanced if the Planning Commission denies the special use permit to enable, in essence, the kibosh of the pending transaction so that KGID can buy the building and exclude the temple. Well, I quite frankly am, astounded by these facts. I respectfully submit the findings set forth in the staff report are incontrovertible, and that the findings must and should be made. I think it's important to recognize that the parking analysis that was commissioned by the temple, LSC traffic engineers, determined that for all but 4 days a year, the high holidays, there is sufficient on-site parking, and that on those 4 days, assuming that all 4 are on weekdays, there may be a shortfall of up to 6 parking spaces, which I can tell you with some confidence would easily be accommodated with on-street parking. And not that we're necessarily foreclosing a joint parking agreement, but I would also ask you to entertain, as you may also be aware, there is a Douglas County parking structure very proximate to this corner. And we would be agreeable to providing shuttle service in the event that, in fact, up to 4 days per year, there was a need to shuttle folks because of insufficient parking. I believe this is kind of a short-term issue since KGID's occupancy is about 2 years, and they are looking for a permanent home. I think that will result in abundant on-site parking without any need whatsoever for off-site parking. The rabbi is here should you have any questions concerning the congregation. And I am pleased to answer any questions that you may have and appreciate your attention and consideration and hopefully favorable motion following the recommendation of staff.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the commission? Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation, Lou. I just wanted to go over the parking issue again in summation of what you said and what we've heard from Lucille and what Maureen and I observed. There is a parking garage that's not really very well depicted in the pictures that are presented. I think it's probably because there's a gate at the entrance to the parking garage that Maureen and I observed, and that's the lower level. And I think it's a little bit deceptive when you drive by the property because you do see a very small parking lot. I believe there's probably 6 or 7 spaces in that parking lot and 1 handicapped space in that parking lot that would provide direct outside access to the building. But the number of parking spaces in the garage is something that I think everybody should be aware of, and that's why, in my view, the parking situation is relatively addressed both by the existing parking and by the requirement for the parking agreement. You were absolutely right, Lou. The TRPA office is probably less than 200 feet away, and that would be one option for a parking agreement. The apartment buildings that are nearby are both, when I drove by, I think I visited the property and just did a drive-by at least 4 or 5 times. And in the apartment parking lots, in the TRPA parking lot, there was always extra room for parking. And these were in the daytime hours when I think anybody who would be concerned that's in the existing building would probably not have any reason to be concerned. And your point is also well taken, Lou. The county parking garage, I would say, while it's across Kingsbury, is probably less than 2 blocks away from the location that we're considering. So I think you've addressed the parking issue very well. Lucille has addressed the parking issue very well. So if I'm mistaken on any of my observations, Lou, I'd appreciate if you would join in, and I can move on to my next subject.
I think you're spot on.
Thank you very much. The other thing I'd like to address briefly is the noticing for this property. When Maureen and I drove by the property in question, they're required to have a sign that provides public notice so that people can see what's going on in a particular area if there's a special use permit or if there's a zoning issue or whatever. We provide for 3 methods of noticing, and these are outlined in County Code 20.20.010. There's 3 things that we do. We require the noticing in the newspaper. We require the noticing by mail for the surrounding areas, and that vicinity map is included in the packet. And then the last thing is the sign that's required for public notice. And I think they're all equally important. In this case, initially, the sign was posted on the building near the front door. When Maureen and I saw that, we both observed that was a little bit difficult for people who might be walking or driving by on Market Street or on Kingsbury to see that something was going on with this building. But I contacted Kara in your office, Mr. Feldman, and she was very helpful, as was the rabbi. They moved the sign almost immediately to the face of the building, and Lucille included that picture in the supplemental materials that were in people's packets. So I want to congratulate them for being responsive. I think our language in Title 20 is a little bit weak. It says that a sign has to be posted, but it doesn't really say that the sign has to be directly visible to the public, which I think we might need to clean up at some point. But again, in this instance, I think the applicant has done what needs to be done, notify the public by means of the sign. So I am pleased that they did that, and I just wanted to bring that forward to the record because that was something that both Maureen and I observed when we drove by the location in person. So that's really all the points that I wanted to address, and make sure that I was not missing anything that the applicant wanted to add on those 2 issues.
We appreciate your suggestion to enhance the opportunity for notice.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman.
Thank you, Kirk. Rabbi, would you like to say something? The microphone, please. Introduce yourself for the record.
Hello, my name is Rabbi Mordechai Richler. First of all, thank you. Thank you for all the back and forth, all the emails, all the help, and thank you to the commissioners for considering our application and change in use. My wife and I have moved to the Lake Tahoe area about 8.5 years ago to open up a Chabad Jewish Outreach Center. Thank God we've seen lots of success, one person at a time. And this is a tremendous opportunity. As you see, I'm a Hasidic Jew, and there's someone that once asked, what is a Hasid? I get that question as well. What's a Hasid? And a Hasid is a lamplighter, and the lamplighter would back in the day for electricity would go around the town, light with a big pole and light up all the street lamps, all the lights that are around. So what happens if the light is up on top of the mountain? Well, the lamplighter will go up the mountain and light the lamp. And what happens if it's in the middle of the ocean? Same too, go out and light the lamp. And that's really what a chassid is. My wife and I moved to Lake Tahoe to light the lamps, to be there as a beacon of light and hope to all the residents, the visitors, to the Jewish community and beyond. And that's really essentially the goal, the purpose of every single human being here in this world, to be a lamplighter, to light up our own souls, to light up our families and the families around us. And that's, God willing, what we plan to do with our purchase in the Lower Kingsbury, and bringing this light of hope and love to the Douglas County, and to be a beacon of light to the entire Lake Tahoe community. So thank you very much. If you have any
Thank you,
questions,
sir.
I'm happy to.
Questions for the rabbi? No? Thank you, sir. Colleen, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Thank you, Chairperson Casey. I think Ken wanted to make comments.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Ken, did you want to comment?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Yes, then we do have Mitch Dion from KGID would like to make a comment. Let me find his, let's see, oops. There we go. Give him a minute, just have to unmute. There we go.
All right, this will be for public comment. There will be a 3-minute time limit.
Hello, my name is Mitch Dion. I am the general manager for Kingsbury GID, and we're speaking against the recommended action for DP 210272. So for the record, I'd like to make a correction. I had provided email to the planning staff several weeks ago. We welcome the religious community to come into our neighborhood, but we do not support this change of use request. The proposed change conflicts with the current use, and we contend the analysis are deficient and the proposed mitigations are inadequate. As noted in the report, Kingsbury GID is the principal tenant of the building, about 50% of the leasable space, and we've been in place for a little over 8 years. Our current intent, by the most recent deliberations of our board and their action, is to stay in place if possible. That would not be possible if this approved change of use goes through. The report mischaracterizes, and I've heard much mischaracterization of the businesses. Kingsbury GID is a round-the-clock, 24/7, 365-day service provider for the community, servicing water, wastewater, road maintenance, snow removal, erosion control, and stormwater drainage. Our location at 255 Kingsbury is our admin operations center, our emergency operations center, where the public and press must have access, as well as where the owners of the adjacent sewage treatment operations that occur just on the adjacent property. Due to COVID, we've spread our operations, and we don't have as many people or vehicles as this site as we normally would or optimally would. In addition, our after-hours operations have also been temporarily adjusted. So it gives a perception that's different than the reality. There's been over 12 occasions in the last 6 months we've had people in the building all night long, including just last Thursday and Friday. But the emergencies just don't recognize weekends or holidays or the Sabbath or not. And I don't think the emergency operations or the use of KGID in this facility has been accurately reflected in the report. Moreover, as a public agency, our public meetings are generally in the evening, accessible to the public, which may have 25 to 30 people in attendance. We also conduct public education and outreach meetings on the evenings and weekends. In fact, pending COVID, we have a planned water conservation education event on Friday, April 29th in the evening. There's been a lot to be said about parking. The building and immediate areas challenged for parking. Contrary to the statements, Market Street is a private road. We haven't seen the sidewalk in Market Street since October. Last week, it got so hazardous out there, I sent our equipment out to move some snow so we could actually have visibility for our employees to egress and ingress out of the building.
Thank you, sir. Your 3 minutes are up. Could you please, if you haven't, your comments right now?
We have vehicles left on the site all night, 24/7, and that takes up those parking spots that were.
Thank you, sir. Could you
Okay.
please submit your comments, if you have them written out, to our clerk so we can include them in the record? Colleen, is there someone else for public comment?
Yes, Ryan would like to speak. Let's see. Give him a minute to unmute.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. You have 3 minutes, Ryan. Please state your name.
Ryan Paul Schiestel. So our biggest reservation or concern is that we already are stressed with parking on the site. I'd like to invite you to inspect the number of parking spaces again. There are factually only 20 spaces. There are 10 in the garage, 10 outside. 2 of the parking spaces in the garage that you are accounting for are permanently occupied by multiple air conditioning units that are not intended for moving. 2 are marked for Blue Sky, another tenant. 2 are marked for Mountain Greenery. 5 are marked for KGID. There is 1 that is not marked. We are told that that was our only space. We started a lease agreement there a few months ago, almost a year ago. We have 6 people in our office plus clients. We regularly need 7 spaces. Outside, there are 9 spots with 1 handicap. There's not 11. This is where you usually have to park, where we usually park with the parking garage being full. KGID also occupies numerous outdoor spaces. We were planning on purchasing the building ourselves 2 years ago. However, when we requested to permanently use 1 or 2 of the spaces in the garage for storage for boxes and deliveries as they came in, we are specifically told that that was not possible due to the overextended parking allocations as it is. We decided not to move forward with the purchase due to the response from the realtor as well as the building department regarding this. We have told other tenant, we have had other tenants complain about us in parking there, stating that we were taking up their spaces. There has been consistent amount of cars or trucks having to park on Market Street, the street that is abutting the building, due to the parking spaces on the property being full. This is already cumbersome and confusing for our clients who visit. People are even forced to park in the neighboring business property across the street at Mott Canyon, which is when the parking garage and the parking lot in the street are full. I've even parked there once as I needed to for space, and I was told if I didn't move my car, it would be towed. This becomes even worse during heavy snow days because it eliminates the parking on the main street as an option due to plowing and snow berms. Tahoe is notorious for parking problems, and this is no exception. It's obvious that parking has exceeded its limit, which was established by the county and building division, which at this point could create safety issues as it is. If you allow this, you are knowingly adding to an existing problem, a serious problem, which could affect our business. With KGID, we do not agree with the special use permit as it will conflict with our business. We were aware of KGID's special meetings and their group gatherings and parking going into it, and we agreed to work around them with that initially. This additional use for additional potentially 25 people, 14 spaces, however many parking, I don't see people walking from 10 miles away to get here, is absurd. As we've been under a remodel for the last year and spent over $100,000, we ran into subsequent problems with plan errors and lack of building plans and incorrect plans. We need to require full inspection provided by the county for an engineer to calculate the amount of additional
Thank
weight
you,
to be
sir.
allowed on the second floor above our offices for safety.
Thank you, sir. Your
This
time is
building
up.
is potentially under.
Thank you, Ryan. If you have your comments written out, will you please submit them to our clerk to include in the record?
Madam Chair, I wasn't clear. Perhaps I didn't understand who Ryan is affiliated with.
Ryan, what is the name of your business again?
Hold on, I had to mute it. He's with Natalie, his wife, would like to speak next, and they're with the interior design.
Tally Jane Interiors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Could I have Natalie speak now?
Yes, for 3 minutes.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Hi, this is Natalie Schiestel. I go by Tally Jane. I'm the owner of Tally Jane Interiors. We have recently moved into the building and have a 15-year agreement. Again, about the parking, I'd like to relay the importance of the number of spaces that will be needed. We have 7 employees. We are looking to expand and hire additional employees. So we would need 7+ spots on a daily basis. We, just like KGID, do not just work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We are there late into the evening. We also work on Saturdays. We also have clients that come to our offices for presentations, meet and greets. It's a very important part of our business to have our clients be represented at our offices, which was the intent of even having an office space. So we would need additional parking spots as well to be able to provide parking for our clients. If the rabbi is granted this permit, which would allow him to purchase the building, and they don't abide by the special use conditions, we would have virtually no recourse. It's not as though I can remove them from ownership or violation of said rules if they are the new owner of the building. It only creates problems and hostility for us existing with other existing tenants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Call-
Natalie. It looks like Chairperson Casey, that's the only, those are the rest of the comments from Zoom.
Thank you, Colleen. I'll close public comment and return it back to the commissioners. Any comments or questions? David?
Yeah, I have been concerned about the parking issue right from the beginning. Sounds like we've got businesses that are working more than just 5 days a week, and that was another concern I had. So I think we need to look very carefully at the parking issue.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number of questions and comments that I'd like to raise with staff or with the applicant. Lucille, the representative of Kingsbury GID said that they provided email to you previously. I did not see anything in the packet. Were those just internally generated emails that had questions or comments? They weren't anything that were specifically directed to be included in the packet or to be brought to the Planning Commission's attention. If you could summarize that for me, please.
Thank you. For the record, Lucille, thank you for that, bringing that up. Yes, Mitch Dion did reach out to me. He was curious as to what was going on. He wanted to know when the meeting was going to be held. It was originally supposed to be in January. We pushed it off to February because there was still some more, the application wasn't complete. So we moved it to February. So we communicated about that. He was concerned about the parking. I asked him to please email me so that I could make it part of the record as far as an email telling me what his concerns were. I never received that, and then he did send an email to us stating he'd like to be on part of the Zoom. That was the communication with Mr. Dion. May I also address the parking, if I can? So, as you know, that parking garage was closed. There was no way for me to get in there, so I had no idea that there were marked off stalls. The information that I was given was, when the building was built, the parking spaces, so we counted parking spaces that way from the site plan that we received from the applicant, and then going on site and counting the spaces. So I think it was, let me go back to my PowerPoint. And there was, it did have, it's not working. I don't know why this. So the underground parking was 12 spaces, and they're saying they have them marked off. There was no way for us to know that. And then there's 11 parking spaces on site with 2 handicapped. Just to make that clear, because I know you had counted, but the snow was in the way, so maybe you couldn't see how many parking spaces there were. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucille. I have a number of concerns. I appreciate the people from the GID and from the Tally Jane Interiors coming and presenting their information to us in public comment. But as I outlined before, we have noticing requirements. It certainly would have been very helpful to me if the objections that would have been raised in writing in a fashion that we could have taken some time to analyze them and digest them. As I go through them, and I tried to take fairly good notes, I do recognize GIDs. We have a GID where I live. They are 24/7. They do perform a lot of functions that are very important to the community. But the parking analysis on packet page 58 says they have 2,462 square feet of floor area, and 10 spaces are required. I didn't hear from the representative of the GID how many employees they have in the office at one time. I would be very surprised if you had 10 employees in the office at one time. GIDs are primarily doing service functions. They're plowing snow, they're repairing streets, they're doing field work. Yes, you do have your records, and you may have occasional meetings. I've been to my GID meetings. I think we maybe have 6 people come to the meetings. Maybe yours are more well-attended with 25 to 30 people, but you're entitled to 10 spaces based on your square footage, and I think that's something that would just be something that has to be done based on square footage. I can't really see without more compelling evidence how your parking needs would be so excessive that they can't be met by what we have outlined in the staff report and the conditions. And then looking down on my notes for the Tally Jane Interiors, you have 6 people in the office. Again, on the parking study, it says 933 square feet. So that's a lot of people for a very small amount of square footage. You're entitled to what you're entitled to. You can try and cram as many office workers or people that come into your offices as you want to, but again, the parking study says 4 spaces are required. That's what's required. Your comment, Ryan, that people would be walking from 10 miles away, I think that's not valid. People are going to be walking, if they're walking from their residences, a fairly close amount. And that's why the facility is going to be located where it's going to be located. So I'm really finding difficulty in endorsing some of the comments that were made because I think the agreement that we have before us has been well thought through and well laid out. So I guess I'm puzzled as to how we could say that parking is going to be a great concern. Again, I visited the location, drove by there at least 4 times or 5 times at different times of the day. Of course, I was not able to examine the parking garage to see how many cars were parked in the parking garage, but there were never more than 2 or 3 cars parked in the parking lot at any time. And again, with the available parking, at the apartment buildings and at TRPA, if a parking agreement is executed, I think that covers the concerns that would be needed. So Lou or Lucille, if I made any observations or comments that you feel are not valid, I would appreciate hearing from staff or the applicant at this point.
I think your comments were very accurate. Thank you.
Sam Booth, you have comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Sam Booth, for the record. I just wanted to clarify a few points of a couple things we heard in public comment, some points that Lucille and I think Kirk Walder made it as well. So in the traffic analysis that was provided by the applicant, looks like that was on page 58 of the packet is where that starts. There's a base parking demand, and they analyzed the parking of the existing uses in the building. I think part of what we're hearing or the concerns we're hearing in public comment are that additional parking spaces are needed for the building beyond what the code requires. And so if you look at the base parking demand that's on that page 58, it shows that Tally Jane Interiors has 933 square feet, and that the code for professional office would require 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And so only 4 spaces would be required for that business. And we heard under public comment that they have 7 employees plus customers that come to the business. So potentially you would see that there's a parking conflict there, that the code's only requiring 4 spaces for that square footage, but they have 7 employees plus customers that would be coming. I think it's fair to assume, you may have the same issues with Blue Sky Events or maybe KGID. I know KGID had mentioned that they have some spaces that are allotted to them specifically and 24/7, those type of things. So I think what it comes down to for the Planning Commission to consider is, you can see that South Lake Tahoe Chabad has, where is that? Yes, 410 square feet of floor area in the worship room. And our parking analysis is based on that worship room and that demand, because that's the room that they're going to be utilizing when they're in the building, not the entire square footage of the other space. So that requirement is 14 spaces. However, if we were to, if another use were to occupy the building, and I can look back at the South Shore Area Plan and Code 20.703090, our approved uses. There are other things, of course, commercial uses, entertainment uses that could be allowed on that second floor of the building without a special use permit. And so just for an example, eating and drinking places is permitted by right and wouldn't require review by the Planning Commission. So you can imagine the second floor of this building could be occupied by a bar or restaurant, and that would be permitted. Staff may do an analysis of parking if there was a building permit required, but otherwise it could be as simple as a tenant or the owner of the building moving into that space. All of this is to say that I think it sounds like there may be a parking issue here on site, but I don't know that issue is being caused by this applicant. Essentially, at this point, it sounds like there may be some conflicts with existing tenants, and also, I think as was stated, we have parking issues in many different sites in Tahoe. It's kind of the nature of things, it's the nature of the weather, snow storage, those type of things. So just wanted to make that point for your consideration. The other thing that I heard, Mr. Feldman mentioned that Market Street has parking on it. And I would agree with him. I've also attended some TRPA hearings and parked on Market Street, and it is a nice wide street. The reason we're now analyzing this and requiring the off-street parking agreement is because the code standard 2692 is for off-street parking. So these are requirements that must be provided outside of the right-of-way. And in addition to that, so it could be considered that there may be some overflow parking in the street, but what we're looking at just strictly from a code standpoint is off-street parking.
Other comments from the commission? Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lucille, under the conditions, it says they must be met at the time of the submittal of a building permit, and maybe I missed when you were explaining that, and I apologize. But just going through here, I'm confused if there's no tenant improvements or anything being done. Is the purpose of the building permit just to satisfy condition 7 regarding any exterior lighting, or what? Why would a building permit be required?
If they were going to make, for the record, Lucy Arroyo, Community Development, if they were going to make any changes to the interior that required a building permit, we would look at it at that time. You can also see that there's a condition on there for receipts for KGID. So we just cover ourselves with the conditions in case there are any building permits required going forward if they needed to remodel and move some plumbing or put in some lighting that required building permits.
Okay, thank you. So this is just in the event that a building permit, if a building permit were to be required because they wanted to do something, these are conditions that would have to be met in order to get the building permit.
For the record, Lucy Arroyo, that's correct.
So would it be correct then to say that condition 3 with regards to the joint use parking agreement would not have to be provided as a condition to the special use permit unless a building permit was needed, or did I misunderstand that?
For the record, Lucille Rayo, it is required, and we would be looking for that, and it'll be a condition of approval. And I know the question came up earlier, how do we control that? if we did not receive the joint parking agreement, if you agree, if the planning commission agreed that that needs to remain as a condition, and we did not receive the joint parking agreement, then it becomes a code enforcement issue. We could even, as staff, come back to you and say, the special use permit needs to be pulled, we have not received the joint use agreement.
Sam Booth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify Mr. Klutz's question, I think, Lucille, what we're looking at is maybe just some housekeeping with the wording in that section of the, on that page of the report. And if it would make sense, I think it may be that condition 3 for planning would be moved under the next title there, that condition must be applicable, throughout the life of the project. And it was our intention in writing that condition that it's applicable throughout the life of the project. The other two above it for the receipts and for the fire department review would be only if a building permit's needed.
Thank you, Lucille. Thank you, Mr. Booth. That cleans things up for me. And just one final comment. I think this really comes down to, as the new owner of the building, should that occur, it sounds to me like one of the first orders of business is to meet with your tenants and try to come up with some sort of amicable or way in which everybody's happy. Now, that's not always the case, but that would be my recommendation, is to meet with the tenants and try to work this out, because I do believe that this is a bigger problem that's not necessarily caused as a result of this application for a special use permit.
Thank you, Bryce. Ken, do you have any comments or questions? Not hearing from Ken, I have a few comments and a couple questions. Lucille, have we heard from TRPA at all?
For the record, Lucille Rayo, no, we have not heard from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency.
I think they would be someone that you would want to follow up with for a parking agreement, because they do have that wonderful parking lot. Lucille?
For the record, actually, I misspoke. Sam Booth did reach out to John Hester. I don't know if Sam wants to speak to that, or do you want me to? Okay, Sam will take it.
Madam Chair, Sam Booth for the record. Yes, I would comment that just in anticipation of the application today, I sent John Hester with TRPA, I believe he's the Chief Operating Officer with TRPA, an email, sent him the link to the Planning Commission agenda and the packet, and put him on notice of the meeting today and our discussion. Just asked if they had any, if they had received their notice. They were notified by mail as well, and if they had any comments. And then I just as well put them on notice that we had this discussion about the potential for a joint parking agreement, and that the TRPA property could be one that would be suitable for that. Mr. Hester didn't give me any indication either way, and I don't know that that he was able to speak for the organization, but he acknowledged that he received my email. We didn't receive any formal public comment after that or information for the Planning Commission.
I think overall that this is a compatible project with this building. I agree with Bryce and Kirk that parking is a problem, and it's not just a problem for this building, it is a problem throughout Tahoe. And I think at this point, the biggest problem was the snow. And one of my big concerns is whoever owns that building should not be held hostage by the tenants wanting to expand. And whoever owns the building will be facing problems from whomever the tenants are. So is it upon us to limit who can own the building, regardless if it's KGID, the synagogue, a restaurant, a bar, whomever? So personally, I would support the SUP if one of the commission members chooses to vote no on the project, they need to look at the findings, which are found in our packet on page 53 and 54, and decide which of the findings this project does not meet. And say that when they do make their vote. If there are other comments, I would entertain them now. If there are not, I would entertain a motion and a second, and then we can have more discussion.
Madam Chair, if I could we get some clarification? There were some conversations about condition number 3 and how that was going to be modified as it relates to the concern around the building permit. I'm not sure I completely understand how the motion would be revised.
Sam Booth?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Madam Chair. Sam Booth, tricky to find the words there, Bryce, but I think that there could be a motion with the conditions in the staff report, and that condition number 3 be moved to be applicable throughout the life of the project.
Lucille, could we have the motion up on the screen, please?
Madam Chair, if I may. Mr. Booth, would it be appropriate to move condition number 3 down into the planning section? Would that suffice?
This is Sam Booth. Yes, I think that's what I'm looking at. If you look at page 48 of the packet, I think on the left-hand side, it actually says page 6 of Lucille's staff report. There's an engineering condition number 1, the building condition number 2, and it says above, those would be met at the time of a building, submittal of a building permit. And then we do have a planning header that starts there with condition 4 and 5. So I would agree with your intention to move condition 3 down to that next planning header that starts with condition 4.
Thank you. And Mr. Taylor, do we need to specifically state that, or given that that's on the record, can it still be the recommended conditions of approval?
Madam Chair, Sam Taylor for the record, Douglas County District Attorney's Office. You can just say, as Mr. Booth stated, that would suffice for the purposes of motion if you would like.
Bryce, you ready? It's your issue.
I was just giving my fellow commissioners an opportunity to comment further or ask questions, but if we're ready, I'd be happy to make a motion. Based on the ability to make the findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, as well as the statements made by Mr. Booth, staff, I recommend approval of DP 21-0272, a special use permit for Rabbi Mordeh Richler Shabbat Lake Tahoe Synagogue based on the staff report, required findings, presentation, and public comment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Mark?
Yes, would you guys be willing to amend your motion to include that Sam Booth must sign off on the parking permit?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I would.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Sam Taylor again for the record. It's the director, not the deputy director, who has to sign off on the agreement.
Madam Chair, I would amend my motion to include that the Director of Community Development sign off on the parking agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any nays? No, motion passes 6-0. Anybody need to stand and stretch, or should we move on to the next item?
I would like to, please, Chairman Marine.
Okay, we will take 5 minutes. Is that enough, Ken?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll be back at 2:15.
Recording in progress.
Okay, it is 2:15. The commission is seated. Ken, are you back? Colleen, has Ken returned?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, we have our next item, agenda item number 2, for possible action, discussion on whether to amend the Planning Commission bylaws to require commission members to attend meetings in person, subject only to limited exceptions. I have requested this item to be on the agenda for a couple of reasons. One, I bring the bylaws back to the Planning Commission every year because I think it's good for us to look at our bylaws every year because it's important for the refresher. And also that I think it's important that we attend our meetings in person. We are accountable to the public, and the best way for the public to get to know us and to interface with us is person to person. And you can't do that over a screen. Since the lockdown, when that went over, the the Board of Commissioners has been meeting in person, and the chambers filled up. People are engaging with one another again. It's very nice to see. The chambers are full. Our VHR committee has been coming down from Tahoe for every one of their meetings. The only times I have not seen our commissioners, Wes Rice and Mark Gardner, not coming into their meetings has been under special circumstances, illness, weather. The only reason that planning commissioners have not been present has been exceptional circumstances, again, weather, illness, scheduled travel. And I think that we should amend our bylaws to reflect that we should come down and meet in person. That would be under section 4.5 on page 75 of our packet. We also need to amend the language under 4.5 to reflect that we don't have a planning manager anymore. We have a development coordinator, which is Colleen, and that's another change we need to make. I would like to have the thoughts and discussion of the other planning commissioners to see what you think about one, meeting in person, except under certain exceptions, and see what you think, and also about changing the language from planning manager to development coordinator. Ken, do you have any thoughts on that?
I like what you are trying to do here. It seems very fair. I don't have any discrepancies with it. And as far as changing the title for Colleen, that sounds perfect.
David?
I've tried to make every meeting I possibly can while a commissioner, and I'll continue to do that here.
Bryce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I think we touched on this subject last year, and if I recall, where we landed is that Nevada revised statute allows for the attendance of meetings via video or telephonic conference. And so, although I believe personally that we should be here, I don't in person. I'm not sure that I necessarily would support a change in the bylaws that would contradict what's in statute.
Kirk?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I agree with the thrust of what you're getting at. I agree 100% with you that meeting in person gives a much different flavor both to your colleagues and to the members of the public who are participating in the meetings. So I do think everybody should try and attend in person whenever possible. I do think Bryce made a good point that we have to be very careful in following NRS Chapter 241. We don't want to run afoul of what state law or be contradictory. I would make the additional point that I also think that this is a county-wide issue that is probably important for the Board of County Commissioners to address. I would feel a little bit uncomfortable having in our bylaws some strictures or requirements that would differ from the board's requirements or that would differ from the, what do we have, Dave, 25 other advisory boards, the Senior Services Group, the Airport Committee, the Parks and Recreation. So I would like us to be consistent, and I think that kind of direction would probably be important that the board would weigh in so that they could provide some countywide direction that might be universal. So I do agree with the thrust of what you're trying to do, and I think we should all try and comply with that whenever possible.
This is in compliance with the NRS 241, which makes allowances for video participation, as we have with Ken. And this is a policy decision for the Planning Commission. Each and every other board can set their own decision and their own policies with their own, I don't know what to call them, their own bylaws or their own operating procedures. The only thing that it turns away is missing meetings for personal reasons. It emphasizes the fact that missing meetings without notifying the chair or the development coordinator is not acceptable, which we have been experiencing that over the last couple of years. It assures that people are coming to meetings as opposed to choosing to not coming in person because it's more convenient to Zoom in. It just makes it more personal to meet with the public as opposed to making it more convenient to not meet with the public. And I think personally that when you accept an appointment as important as we have, it is our duty to be as accessible to the public as possible. And however the vote comes on this, I just felt it was important enough that we have another discussion. But this is not something that is out of line with NRS 241. Mark?
I believe that in-person meetings are substantially better than meetings through Zoom or other electronic media. I believe that, yes, we should be here. I encourage the public to come here, and I'd very much like to see in-person meetings. However, as with you and my fellow commissioners, it comes down to a state law issue, and I'm going to ask Sam to weigh in on that. Sam Taylor.
Sam Taylor, for the record, Douglas County DAs. NRS Chapter 241, relative to the open meeting law, does specifically authorize members of the Planning Commission to appear via video conference or telephonic or other electronic means. The bylaws, if amended, would allow for exceptions to that. Ultimately, this issue would come down to whether or not if somebody, say, for example, failed to appear in person and you, the Planning Commission, decided to take action for the matter to the board and request that person to be removed, the board would have to apply the requirements of NRS 241 And it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for the board to remove a person under such circumstances. So one of the things that you could do is make it a goal to have attendance in person. But, and then, like Maureen is pointing out, have exceptions to that, which would be for, say, for example, vacation, business purposes, illness. If you're sick, if you got COVID, you should be staying home anyway. You shouldn't be, coming to a meeting in any event. And that provision, by the way, was added. The teleconference aspect was added just recently with respect to COVID. So obviously, the Nevada legislature recognized that some meetings needed to be conducted, via Zoom. There are reasons for that. So as long as you provide exceptions, and I think as long as you don't try to remove somebody if they don't appear, say, for example, in person, which kind of does make it a goal in a de facto sense anyway. It's something that you're striving for, but maybe not necessarily able to enforce. I think that would be sufficient. So you could add it as long as there's exceptions, and as long as you recognize that somebody probably couldn't be removed as a result of making the change.
And this is not about removal. This is just about reminding us as members of the Planning Commission that we would prefer people to appear in person as opposed to not appearing in person. And that for me, the certain circumstances would be circumstances outside our control, illness, accident, family emergencies, weather, scheduled vacations, business travel, those types of things. We can't control those. Those are out of our hands. And those are the types of things, but it would be if someone takes off and they don't call to let us know, to let the chair or Colleen know. They just don't come, they don't show up. Those are the types of things at the end of the year when Sam Booth or Community Development gives us our attendance sheets and our voting sheets to let us know what we've done from the year, and the Board of Commissioner looks at it and they go, well, where was this person? And they see that there are many absences, and they wonder, well, what happened to this person? Where were they? Those are the types of things that the board looks at. And then they make the policy decision whether or not they want to remove someone. That's not up to us. It's definitely not up to us. That's not a decision I want to make. That's not a decision the Planning Commission makes. That's up to the board. But this is just a reminder for us, something we strive for. Other comments? And this is not a vote. This is just something if we want to have staff bring something back with recommendations and changes. We know for sure we need to change the language to development coordinator instead of the planning manager.
Well, I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion. I make a motion that we have staff look at the issue, bring us back recommendations at a future meeting to encourage very strongly that all members attend in person.
Do you want to include except under certain exceptions and the language changing planning manager to development coordinator?
I would include changing planning manager to development coordinator. However, I believe that it's up to staff to come up with the exceptions and bring it back to us.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, do you want to open this to public comment? I'm not sure we have anybody, but just for the record.
Ding dong. Colleen, any public comment?
Not on this item. I think they're just waiting for closing comment.
I'll close public comment. Discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, I didn't realize that there was any action relevant to this item. We're just simply asking, it's a motion to ask staff to go back and make recommendations with respect to the existing bylaws, and those will be brought back to us at some point, at which time we'll take a vote on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Closing comment. Colleen?
Thank you. Ryan would like to make some closing comment again. I wasn't sure if you were allowing comment on items that were already spoken to.
Yes. Ryan, 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I on? Okay, thank you very much. So on the parking issue, I just wanted to state for the record that, the parking issues are an existing thing that we discovered after starting with our agreement with the building. This additional special use permit is only going to add to that. And the we're busting at the seams. But there's one thing that I'm hoping that you guys can, at least for the sake of public safety, do is one, the comments on how many parking spaces there are is actually incorrect. And they had said that they were unable to verify the garage. So the parking is actually not 23 spaces, it's 20. So I'd like that to be reviewed, as well as engineering to make sure that the loads for the amount of visitors for the upstairs, which is directly above our office, will be supported with that, as we found in our 1-year remodel a tremendous amount of building issues and things that were not done to permit in that process, which is creating a lot of concern for us. Hopefully you guys can, in that special use permit, have the new buyer state how many vehicles they'll plan on being put on the property, and a way for them to abide to that, as well as out of the 20 spaces, KG Idea is slated for 10. We have 4. Blue Sky Events is 3. That leaves 17 spaces with 3 left. I don't know how we're going to get 14 more spaces out of that area. But I hope that you guys can at least make sure that those things are done with due diligence and accuracy for the safety of the existing tenants.
Thank you, Ryan. Colleen, anyone else?
Thank you. No, it appears that was it.
Thank you. If there is no one else, I will close public comment and I will adjourn this meeting.
Recording stop.